Have you ever sat with someone in the twilight of their life and felt a sudden, inexplicable shift in the room? It isn't something you can see or touch. It's a change in the atmosphere, a quiet intensity that hangs in the air. You see it in a distant look that seems to gaze past the walls of the room, through the very fabric of our reality. You hear it in a long, profound silence that speaks more than a lifetime of words. You feel it in a phrase spoken with such serene conviction that it sends a shiver down your spine. These are not signs of confusion. They are not the ramblings of a fading mind. What if I told you these moments are windows into a reality far grander than our own? What if these are signals, clear and consistent, that a person is beginning to see the spiritual world? For decades, Dolores Cannon, a tireless and meticulous scholar of human consciousness, did not just ponder this question, she investigated it. Through thousands of sessions with individuals from every walk of life, every culture, and every belief system, she listened. She listened to those who had lived long enough to have no need to prove anything to anyone anymore. And in that raw, unfiltered honesty, she discovered a pattern, a signal so strong and so consistent it was undeniable. It wasn't a theory or a matter of faith. It was an observation, repeated time and time again. She found that as we approach the final transition of our lives, something incredible happens. The veil between worlds becomes thin, and for those who are ready, it begins to part. This is not a story about the end of life. This is a story about the expansion of it into something we are all destined to understand. This journey we're about to take is one of respect, clarity, and profound revelation. It is for anyone who values the deep wisdom that only a long life can bring. Before we delve into this extraordinary discovery, if the exploration of life's deepest mysteries resonates with you, take a moment now to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. It is your way of telling us that we should continue this journey together, uncovering the truths that matter most. Now, let us begin by examining the very first and most powerful sign that Dolores Cannon identified. According to her extensive accounts, the strongest indication that an older person is beginning to perceive the spiritual realm is a sudden and profound change in their perception of time. Imagine someone who, for 80 years, lived by the clock. They were punctual, impatient with delays, always planning the next hour, the next day, the next week. Their life was a rigid structure built on the foundation of linear time. Then, almost overnight, that structure dissolves. They begin to act as if time no longer holds any power over them. The clock on the wall becomes a mere suggestion. They might spend an entire afternoon simply observing the clouds drift across the sky, or sit in complete silence for hours, not out of boredom or sadness, but out of a deep, abiding contentment. Their speech changes, becoming slower, more deliberate, as if they are listening to a subtle melody that no one else can hear. This transformation is not accompanied by suffering or confusion, which is what makes it so remarkable. On the contrary, it is almost always marked by an unusual and unshakable serenity. It is as if a frantic, lifelong negotiation with time has finally ended and a peace treaty has been signed. Something deep within them has finally made peace with the world, with the present moment. Dolores Cannon noted this phenomenon in hundreds upon hundreds of accounts. It didn't matter if the person was a humble farmhand in rural America who had never read a spiritual book in his life, or a sophisticated urban lady in India surrounded by ancient traditions. The language they used might have been different, but the essence of the experience was identical. It is a universal signal that they are preparing for something much bigger, a journey that operates on a different clock entirely, or perhaps on no clock at all. They approach this preparation without fear, without urgency, but with a quiet, powerful acceptance. It's important to understand that this transition isn't always sudden. It often begins subtly, weeks or even months before any more serious physical signs appear. It is a silent, gentle unfolding, the first whisper that the soul is turning its attention inward and upward. This newfound peace with time is just the beginning. It is the fertile ground from which even more profound experiences begin to blossom. As the external world fades in importance, an internal world rich with connection begins to open up. In her interviews, Dolores reported that many older people, shortly before their passing, would begin to describe specific visions. These were not uncontrolled or frightening hallucinations. They were calm, lucid, and remarkably consistent encounters with presences that felt deeply familiar. An older person might casually mention during breakfast, "My mother came to visit me last night. She looked so young and happy." They speak of it with the same matter-of-fact tone they might use to comment on the weather. There is no alarm, no distress. In many cases, these visions are accompanied by a tranquility that surprises even seasoned doctors and caregivers who are accustomed to seeing agitation or fear in the final stages of life. Dolores Cannon termed this phenomenon contact with expanded consciousness. She theorized that in this unique phase of life, the veil between the physical world and the spiritual dimension becomes thinner, more permeable, allowing for glimpses of a reality that is always present but usually beyond the reach of our five senses. This experience, she insisted, does not depend on a person's religion, faith, or prior beliefs. It is something that simply happens, an innate process of the human spirit. It is like the sunset, which arrives without asking our permission but transforms the entire landscape when it appears. In session after session, Dolores would hear phrases spoken not with anguish, but with a peaceful certainty. "I know I'm not alone," a man might say, his eyes filled with a quiet light, or a woman would whisper, "They've come to get me," with a soft smile. These were not cries for help, but statements of fact from a soul that was being welcomed. It was as if, at the very end of life, an innate primal wisdom awakens, an understanding that doesn't come from books or lectures, but from the lived journey of the soul itself. This connection with the spiritual world, in these cases, is not spectacular or dramatic. It is simple, human, and present in the smallest of gestures. A gentle smile for no apparent reason, a long, knowing look, a silence filled with profound and unspoken meaning. These waking encounters are often mirrored by even more profound experiences that occur during sleep. It is at this stage that many older folks begin to report dreams that are fundamentally different from any they have had before. Their entire lives' dreams may have been a chaotic jumble of daily anxieties and strange, nonsensical images. But now they begin to have incredibly vivid, coherent, and beautiful dreams. In these dreams, they meet people who have already passed on, not as ghostly apparitions, but as vibrant, loving beings. They describe receiving long, warm hugs from a spouse who died years ago, or hearing comforting words of reassurance from a parent. They visit places they have never been in their physical lives, landscapes of breathtaking beauty, filled with light and a sense of overwhelming peace. Dolores Cannon called these dreams preparatory visits. She came to believe they were not mere figments of the imagination, but were actual, real experiences lived by the consciousness outside the confines of the body. They were journeys to the subtle planes of existence, a gentle orientation for the soul before its final departure. Many would wake up with tears in their eyes, but when asked, would clarify that they were not tears of sadness, but of pure, overwhelming emotion and joy. They would report having felt a peace they had never before experienced in their waking life. These preparatory dreams often become more frequent in the final weeks and months, acting as a consistent and loving reassurance. When questioned about what was to come, many would state that they no longer feared it. They felt with a deep inner knowing that something good and deeply welcoming awaited them, something that words could not fully describe, but that their soul now recognized as home. This process, though intensely personal, follows patterns that Dolores Cannon identified across years of research in different corners of the world with people from countless backgrounds. The conclusion she drew was inescapable. As the human spirit approaches its final transition, it naturally begins to access a broader, more expansive consciousness. As this inner world transforms so dramatically, the way the individual interacts with their external world begins to change in equally profound ways. Another common characteristic that Dolores observed was the emergence of a more intense and intimate connection with nature. Many older people, even those who had spent their lives in bustling cities, begin to observe their surroundings with a new and focused interest. They find deep meaning in the simple movement of trees in the wind, in the complex melody of a bird's song, in the way the afternoon light filters through a window and paints a pattern on the floor. These small, everyday details, once overlooked, now gain a monumental importance. Dolores saw this as a clear sign that the individual's consciousness is recalibrating, tuning itself into the more subtle, living frequencies of reality. It's not uncommon for a person in this phase to express a sudden, strong desire to be near the countryside, to see the ocean one last time, or to simply feel the earth beneath their feet. It is a silent, instinctual call that seems to come from deep within, as if the body and soul know they are approaching a return to something essential. This change of focus, this more contemplative and appreciative gaze, does not arise by chance. Dolores believed that at this moment the spirit begins its gentle process of detaching from the dense concerns of the material world, preparing for a smooth and conscious transition. This process is almost always accompanied by a significant change in how the person relates to others. Old arguments and long-held grudges suddenly seem to lose their power and cease to make sense. There is a powerful, undeniable tendency to seek reconciliation, even with people from whom they have been estranged for years. Dolores reported that this deep inclination to forgive and to ask for forgiveness is one of the most powerful and moving signs that the soul is aligning with something greater. She often said that when consciousness expands, the ego diminishes, and when the ego steps aside, the heart takes command. This leads to unexpected conversations, to gestures of affection that may have been absent for decades, and to a palpable lightness in family relationships. Family members who had been distant may receive a sudden phone call, not for any particular reason, but just to connect. Old friends may surface in conversation or even reappear for a visit after many years apart. These movements are not random, they are integral parts of a broader process of completion in which everything seems to converge towards the essential values of connection, understanding, and peace. It is as if the soul is tidying up its emotional house, ensuring that all that remains is love. If this exploration of consciousness and the soul's journey resonates with the experience you or a loved one has had, I invite you to share a part of that wisdom. In the comments below, simply type, "I have witnessed this." It's a way to honor these sacred experiences and acknowledge the collective truth we are all a part of. This reorganization of relationships is mirrored by a profound reorganization of one's own personal history. Dolores Cannon pointed out that many older people begin to revisit old events and memories with a completely different perspective. Situations that once caused them immense pain or embarrassment are now seen with a new lens of understanding and compassion. Old hurts, resentments, and regrets that they may have carried for a lifetime begin to dissolve, seemingly without effort. It's as if the mind, in its final chapter, enters a state of cosmic reorganization, filtering what truly mattered and gently letting go of the heavy baggage that no longer serves the soul's journey. According to her, this is not just a psychological coping mechanism, it is a spiritual process, a part of reconnecting with a more subtle and forgiving dimension of existence. People who may have previously avoided talking about the past begin to do so naturally, not to complain or regret, but to weave the threads of their life into a coherent and meaningful tapestry. It is as if they are finally organizing the pieces of a grand puzzle, and for the first time, the complete picture becomes clear. This sudden clarity, this deep and abiding peace with all that was lived, is another powerful indication that something profound is happening, something that transcends standard medical or scientific explanations, but that is perceived with crystal clarity by those who are close by. This peaceful reconciliation with one's own life story is what allows for the most significant shift of all, the practical disappearance of the fear of death. In the countless accounts she collected, this was a constant theme. The terror of the unknown is replaced by a kind of greater understanding, a quiet curiosity. This is difficult to put into words, but it transforms the way the person deals with everything and everyone around them. This growing certainty and peace often stem from experiences that are perhaps the most difficult for us, the observers, to comprehend. Some older people report a very specific and recurring feeling of having, as they put it, 1 foot here and 1 foot there. They describe with remarkable calm and rich detail, feeling as if they have partially left their physical bodies, even while being fully awake. Dolores collected a vast number of these accounts. They spoke of gently floating above their own bed, of observing themselves sleeping or resting from a corner of the room, or of clearly hearing conversations taking place in another part of the house. According to her meticulous research, these are not delusions or products of a failing imagination. They are legitimate out-of-body experiences, a classic sign of a consciousness that is gradually and gently detaching from its physical anchor. In almost every case, these experiences left the person feeling more peaceful, not more frightened. It was as if they had been given a small, reassuring sample of what was to come. After experiencing this state, they began to face their remaining days with a different kind of lightness, without hurry, without fear, simply living in the present moment with a newfound sense of surrender and trust in the process. At this pivotal point in the journey, the presence and compassion of family members and caregivers become more essential than ever. Dolores Cannon always reinforced that no matter how much a person's consciousness is expanding into other realms, the need for human affection remains irreplaceable. A simple, gentle touch on the hand, a word spoken calmly and lovingly, a look of pure affection. These are the gestures that anchor the person in this world with love, even as they prepare for the next. Many older people, even in the midst of these profound spiritual perceptions, continue to intensely value the presence of their children, grandchildren, and friends. It is a phase in which love is expressed in its purest form, simple, direct, and without the need for grand speeches. Just being together, sharing a quiet space, holds an enormous weight and significance. According to Dolores, this affectionate bond that bridges the worlds is one of the most beautiful aspects of this entire stage, because it shows that even in the face of the ultimate transition, there is still sacred space for what is most human: care, connection, and love. We also see that it is common for older people to maintain a lighter emotional routine, even when faced with significant physical pain or discomfort. Dolores saw this as a clear indication that the mind is no longer so intensely identified with the body. The person may have physical limitations, but they demonstrate a peace that can be startling and inspiring. Spontaneous smiles, unexpected words of thanks for small kindnesses, and gestures of tenderness become more frequent. For Dolores, this was not a miracle, but a natural consequence of a consciousness vibrating at a higher, more peaceful frequency. She always recommended that families and caregivers observe the emotional and energetic behavior of their loved ones even more closely than the physical signs. Many of the most important answers are found in this invisible but very real realm. As the end of the physical journey approaches, there is often a final tipping point, a moment of transition that many do not perceive for what it is. Dolores called this moment total openness. It's when the older person begins to say goodbye, even if they never use those words. They may begin to give away cherished personal items, meticulously organize old photos, or speak more often and with more feeling about their most cherished memories. This is all part of a sacred and symbolic process of closure. It is as if they are consciously and lovingly putting everything in order before they embark on their journey. This type of attitude, she noted, is another strong indication that the soul has already understood and accepted that it is about to change its state of being. Instead of resisting this movement, it welcomes it with a natural grace. For those around them, it can be heart-wrenching to witness this type of farewell, but it is also a profound invitation to express gratitude, to listen deeply, and to simply be present. In these simple gestures, the older person is saying more than words could ever express. Contrary to what many might think, this profound spiritual connection at the end of life does not require any special preparation or advanced spiritual knowledge. Dolores Cannon always reinforced that every single human being, regardless of their culture, background, or beliefs, is capable of experiencing this beautiful and natural process. It does not choose only the most religious or mystical people. It simply happens as an integral part of the very nature of our existence. The most important thing, she insisted, is to allow it to happen without blockages, without fear, and without denial. When family members and caregivers can remain open, listen with respect, and validate the perceptions of their loved one, the entire experience becomes lighter. Fear decreases, communication improves, and the process of parting transforms from a dreaded end into a moment of deep, shared connection. The farewell, in this context, is not a sharp, painful cut, but a gentle and sacred transition. Dolores always repeated that dying is simply like crossing a doorway. For those of us who stay behind, it may seem like a final, tragic end, but for the one who is going, it is just the beginning of a new and glorious stage. The signs we have discussed, the dissolution of time, the visits from loved ones, the peaceful dreams, the reconciliation with life, are like little clues, breadcrumbs of light left along the path. They show us that there is so much more than what meets the eye, and that this sacred passage can be lived with peace, with full consciousness, and even with a sense of profound hope. Throughout our lives, we accumulate experiences, lessons, and affections. When the time comes to leave, all of this transforms into our baggage for this new and incredible journey. Therefore, this is an invitation to listen more attentively, to be present with more respect, and to understand that the end of life can truly be the beginning of another, broader perception. If you have an older person in your family, you may have already noticed some of these signs. And if you are living through this right now, remember that every gentle gesture you make, every moment you listen without rushing, every time you respect their reality, you are doing the most important work there is. You are helping a soul to transition in love and peace. The spiritual world, according to the lifetime of work by Dolores Cannon, is not distant or foreign. It begins to reveal itself to us when we simply open our hearts enough to perceive it. Old age, so often seen in our culture as an end, can also be a great awakening, a moment of ultimate grandeur in which the body withdraws so that the soul may fully and magnificently expand. This conversation does not have to end here. In fact, it shouldn't. If this message has touched you, share it with someone you know who could benefit from this perspective. And to continue exploring the most profound questions of life and consciousness with us, please subscribe to the channel. Together, we can continue this journey of learning, of growing, and of finding purpose in every stage of our existence.